Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about game development tasks that I'm bad at. So I thought I'd talk about those game development skills that have eluded me over many decades and that I've finally resolved myself to you're not going to learn these, you're not going to get better at these. It's better to let someone else do it. So let me talk about that. So first of all, I think the biggest thing when I look back at my games, it's adding or editing, paring away features. If there's one problem I always have is I want too many system mechanics in one game. I just when I start thinking it's like I want this, I want this. This one makes sense, but only if you have this one to balance it. We need more of this. There's, hey, I'm worried about this kind of character being made and not being supported, so we need to add this, this, and this. In every one of my games, it adds up to too many system mechanics. I think Arcanum was probably the ultimate expression of that, where if there was an idea that anybody had, it went into Arcanum. And Arcanum just had everything. I mean, it had you picked races and attributes and skills and backgrounds, and there was magic and tech and companions and summoned companions. Just if we had an idea, it went in there. But it wasn't just that. Like Temple of Elemental Evil is a good example of when I told them I didn't think we should do paladins and bards and maybe druids because they were too specialized of classes, and Atari pushed back and said no, we need to have them. I should have said that's not something you're getting in 18 months. It's the problem we had with Temple was 14 people should not have been making a game, or actually I think it was only a dozen, a game of that magnitude, of that scope. Something had to give, and what gave was story and just total playtime. And then we shipped with a lot of bugs, and that's all another thing. But basically, it should have been cut back, and that's true on many Mega games. They should have been scoped back. Outer Worlds, I think, was correctly scoped back. And I remember, even before we shipped, people on the team were like, aren't people going to complain the game is too short? And I remember saying, if that's what we get, if that's the complaint we get on this game, that it's too short, I'll take that. I'll take that over it's massively buggy, it crashes all the time, it's imbalanced, it's not fun, whatever. So I think that's the first thing I'm bad at. The second thing I'm bad at, which touches on that first one, is balancing game systems. So not only do I add too many in, I end up not balancing them. Backgrounds, traits, perks, skills, magic spells. Now, I was the first one to say I care more about fun than balance. But there were just times where I didn't balance well enough. And we ended up with things like in Arcanum, that harm spell was just the best spell. It was everybody takes it. In Fallout, that nobody liked the gambling skill. It wasn't worthwhile. And there were some perks that just don't bother taking these. They're not powerful enough. Or we had a level cap of 20, but we gave you 2 perks at level 18. Have fun playing those for 2 levels. There were just things like that in all my games that when I look back, I'm like, why did I do that? Why didn't I change that? And the answer is always the same. When you're prioritizing bug lists, balance never gets a high priority for me. I go after crash bugs. I go after you can't finish the game with this build. It either dies all the time when it gets to this level, or you end up needing to check skills that this particular build will never have. I look for things like the main story can't be completed by a certain build. So yeah, there's things like that just always prioritize on my list way above balance. The third thing I'm bad at is writing dialogue. I used to say writing, but now I say writing dialogue. Because here's what took me a long time to learn. My first few games, Grand Slam Bridge, Bard's Tale construction set, Rags to Riches, I didn't write anything. I don't think there's a single line I wrote in that game, in any of those games. In Fallout, there were quests I suggested, but somebody else wrote. But then I wrote the opening cinematic. And that got so much praise that I'm like, I must be a natural writer. No, I was not. When Arcanum rolled around, I didn't have time to do writing. I basically made huge lists of quests, suggested quests, and how they would play out, but I didn't do any of them. That's why when a lot of you ask questions about Arcanum, I don't have the answer. I deferred to Leonard in both of those chats to answer questions about the quests. But when I got to Temple, well, Leonard and Jason and Chad Moore and Sharon Shellman, they were all over on Vampire. And they wrote good dialogue and quests. So I thought, I'll do it. So I wrote a lot of the dialogue along with Tom Decker on Temple. And they just weren't very good. Mine were not very good at all. However, I have learned that I can do lore text. I did a lot of it in Outer Worlds. I'm good at that. Short things. I can write cinematic narration, not conversation, not character development. A narrator doesn't have a character. He doesn't have a personality. So I'm good at that, but I'm not good at conversation, character building, writing. So I've learned to be precise and I can do some narrative design, but not all. And then the last thing that I'm really bad at, contract negotiation. And that's something I learned at Troika, but then realized later I was bad at it even for my own personal negotiation. But let's talk about Troika. So on the very first contract for Arcanum, we used a lawyer and he caught a lot of things. But even then, there were things he and all of the three of us, Leonard, Jason, and I missed. The biggest one for Arcanum was digital rights. They're not included. It specifically says it's for physical boxed goods that are being sold. So I know it excludes things like digital sales, but I think it also excludes if there's ever, if Arcanum plushies had come out, we wouldn't have gotten anything from that. And that was bad. We did include it. We were smart enough to include it in the next ones. But the problem was we were negotiating both Temple and Vampire contracts while things were still happening. We were still doing patches on Arcanum. After we had those new contracts, that's when we realized that the Arcanum contract and now the Temple and Vampire contracts did not include our right to make unofficial patches. So all three of those games, the same thing happened. Once the publisher had paid for a few patches, they didn't want to make any more patches. And on all three, we're like, great, we'll do our own patches. No. And we're like, we'll make them unofficial. No. And we were told we literally were not legally allowed to make patches, which is super frustrating and super annoying. But the worst part is you have fans telling us how we've abandoned our own games. Oh, by the way, you're often not allowed to talk about contracts when you're under them because, I don't know, rights. The one thing I wish I had added, the one line I wish I had added to all of those contracts, well, I probably couldn't get it for Temple and Vampire, but definitely for Arcanum, was IP reversion for non-use. You basically throw in a line that says, if you end up not using this IP for 5 years, and maybe you let them negotiate you out to 10 years, then we get it back. What's great about that is if they say, nope, we're not going to do that, we're like, well, look at it this way. If it makes a lot of money and you're using it, we can't use it. But if you don't use it for that period of time, we get it. But what's the loss to you? You're not using it. You're literally not using it. It's the same thing. I had a friend negotiate a contract he was working on as an employee, and he said he didn't want to travel. And they're like, well, we can't guarantee it, but we're almost positive you're not going to be traveling in this role. So he added a line, and he said, if I travel, you have to pay for a first-class ticket for me. And they were like, we're not going to pay that. And he goes, you just told me I wouldn't be traveling, so this clause will never get activated. So they agreed. He traveled twice his first year at that company. And what was funny is they had to pay first class, and they were mad about it. But he's like, you effectively lied to my face, and now you're mad that you're the one paying for the lie. And that's what I wish I had done. I wish I had put in more clauses that were, This clause will do nothing bad for you, unless what you're telling me right now isn't true, in which case it kicks in. Because they don't want to admit they're lying to you, so often they'll agree to that conditional clause. And then when the conditional happens, too bad. But guess what? I was terrible at that. I was also terrible at that for my own contracts. I never managed to negotiate royalty when I was at Carbine, or bonus for sales or whatever for WildStar, even though other people there did. And I knew about it. And when I asked for it, they're like, At that point, I should have just left at that point, but I'm just really bad at personal negotiation. And you know what? I know I've talked for 10 minutes, but I'm going to throw in 2 bonus things. These are game dev activities that I'm good at, but I hate doing. The first one was HR. I was the human resources person at Troika for the last couple of years. Sharon did it at the beginning, but eventually she left Troika to be a stay-at-home mom. They had 3 children. Sharon is Jason Anderson's husband. Great artist, did great HR. I took over. I was good at it, and I hated every moment of it. The paperwork for hiring, the paperwork for insurance, state and federal paperwork and reports. Oh my goodness. I don't even want to start. Since I was that person, I don't even want to start on the paperwork I had to do to shut Troika down. Troika was started by literally signing a piece of paper and paying a filing fee. Boom, company exists. Shutting it down, nightmare. About 8 months of work, multiple state and federal paperwork and reports, rules that contradicted each other. One rule that said I had to do A, the other one said I had to do B, and A and B were exclusive. My programmer brain exploded. Then the other thing that I was good at and hated doing was accounting. I was basically, although maybe I shouldn't call myself that, maybe I should call myself Troika's bookkeeper. But again, for the last couple of years after Sharon left, I did all the bookkeeping and bill paying at Troika. That's why I was, between those 2 things, HR and accounting, is why I wasn't full-time on Vampire. So that meant bills would come in, I'd confirm them, because occasionally companies will send you a bill that isn't really a bill. You didn't order this. You didn't ask for this service. They're just billing you for it and hoping you'll pay. So I'd pay the legitimate bills. Sometimes you have to look at a bill and go, that's not due for another 3 weeks, and we get a big payment coming in a week, I'm going to put it off. You had to juggle stuff like that at a small company. I also did the QuickBooks, which we would then send to our accountant, who would make sure that everything was good and everything. He complimented me at one point on how everything was accurate to the penny and categorically correct, that I was putting expenses in the right categories. It helped him out a great deal, and I'm like, I'm good at this. And then he'd leave from that meeting, and I'm like, and I hate doing it. I hated it. Every time something came up, and I knew the next hour or 2 hours or all the rest of the day, I'd be doing something with our books, I was just like, I just deflated a little bit. Another reason I didn't want to run a company. And by the way, I know there were a lot of comments, people, why didn't you just hire a business person? With what? We didn't have any spare money. The first year or 2, Leonard, Jason, and I had to pay each other like half salaries. We had no money to hire a business person. Now, you might go, well, you'd hire a business person, then you can get more money. That's true, but it's a catch-22. How do we hire a business person with money we don't have to then maybe get money that we could use to pay for a business person? Anyway, here's my bottom line with this. You know what? It's okay not to be good at everything. And it's okay to not like doing things that you're good at. The secret of all this is you have to find the intersection of things you like doing, things you're good at doing, and things that people will pay you to do. If you can do that, you're golden. For me, luckily, that was actually rolling up my sleeves and making games, either programming or design. I like doing it. I think I'm good at it. People will pay me to do it. It's a happy intersection. Find that intersection for yourself. You can be happy too. So good luck.